Good morning, everyone. My name is Dimitri Kaplianis, and I chair the Radical Generosity team this year. By now, we hope you've heard plenty about this year's pledge drive. We are asking everyone to fill out a pledge card in which you tell us how much financial support you plan to give First Unitarian next year. No money is due right away, but when you fill out a pledge card, you tell us how much you plan to give, and that way First Unitarian can set a budget for next year. A few weeks ago, Angela preached a sermon about how important our religious community is, especially when we go through hard times. Specifically, she mentioned the zombie apocalypse. But you know, you don't have to be attacked by zombies to find yourself in need of spiritual support and community. That's what our budget really is about. It says mortgage payment and staff salaries and things like that on it. But what we are building when we plan to pay those expenses is really not a budget, but a very unique spiritual home. It's a house for hope. It's a house that includes a growing religious education program for kids and teens. It includes community celebrations and events, outreach projects like the after-school tutoring program, the weekly food pantry, and the English second language classes for adults, and much more too. So far, we have received $540,000 in pledges. That's 75% of our goal. That's a great start. Now we need to reach $200,000 more to reach our goal. If you'd like to know, so far the average pledge is $1,800, and that's an increase of about 8.5% off last year. Some of it will come from people who are listening right now who have never made a pledge before and are about to do it for the very first time. Is that you? You are so important. Thank you. The rest will come from you who have pledged in the past. You are our steadfast supporters. But maybe you've been procrastinating. What the heck? Zombies! What are they saying? Phones! Phones, that's right! Every November, the board of directors gets together and calls people who haven't pledged to find out if they are unable to do so or if they just haven't gotten around to it yet. Don't make us call you. Phones! Yes, phones, right. Please make your pledge. Big or small, every pledge card counts. And your church is counting on you. You can pick up a pledge card from the welcome table in the foyer of the sanctuary. You can pledge online, and there's a Q card and a web address in your order of service. It really is easy. If you haven't pledged yet, you can do it today. Thank you for your generosity. It's okay, zombies. They are going to turn in their pledge cards. They promise.
Many, as in made by hands.
As in hands pressed together.
As in manual labor of love and light.
Prayer pushed into rock.
Letter by letter.
As in, the very rocks will cry out if we don't build our faith.
Good morning to you on this Dia de los Muertos morning. How many of you are going to the Muertos y Marigolds parade today? I think we have a lot of UUs that go down there. I'll see you there. We have an unusual service this morning, not only zombies, but poetry. More poetry than usual in a worship service. Backed by popular demand, it is a worship service that is essentially a movement of poems. Many of you will remember when lay leader Michaela Renz Whitmore and our former ministerial intern Brian Elwood led a poetry service last year. What we experienced was a service that was built around many spoken words, but not a lot of talking. So there's no sermon today, at least not in the usual sense. Instead of a sermon with its long-form spiritual reflection, poems will flow over and around us. For many of us, poetry is kind of like a foreign language. Many of us remember trying to read poems in the past and struggling to understand them. I've had that experience too, for sure. Poems that seem to require a master's degree in literature to understand, right? We all know about those. But the poetry you'll hear today is not like that. Today is about language that emboldens rather than alienates. It's about words that shimmer, as the poet Elizabeth Alexander says. Words that shimmer. Now that's a poetic thing to say. How can a word shimmer? We're not talking about words in shimmery ink or shimmery paper, but we feel the truth of it. Some words shimmer. They catch the eye of the imagination or the soul, as though they were reflecting some light from within back at us. It doesn't mean we'll understand every word or every line. In fact, I had to look up the word ars from Elizabeth Alexander's poem, Ars Poetica, which you'll hear in a few minutes. I didn't know what that word meant. It is Latin for art, skill, or craft. I want to say one more thing, and then I'm going to introduce our special guest. Humans are the only animals that keep experimenting all their lives in how to be human. Crickets and seagulls and wolves figure it out. They know how to be themselves. But people keep working on it and working on it and playing with it, and that seems to be an important part of being a human being. And the best religions ground us in our experimenting rather than offering us a final answer. The art of poetry, the ars of poetry, is like a million experiments in being. Poets try things out with unusual words and word combinations, and by calling attention to things we might otherwise overlook, and by startling us out of our habitual mental frameworks. So we invite you to experiment with them this morning, and with us, by letting the poems flow over and through you, and seeing what shimmers. Michaela and I are honored to have Hakim Bellamy with us today. Hakim is an award-winning poet. In 2012, he was named the first poet laureate of Albuquerque. He is a national and regional poetry slam champion, and his poetry has been published on the Albuquerque Convention Center, outside of a library, in inner-city buses, and in numerous anthologies across the globe. He's also a journalist and a community organizer, and he has a master's degree in communications. He facilitates youth writing workshops for schools, jails, churches, prisons, and community organizations, and he is the on-air television host for New Mexico PBS Colores program. So, wow, we got some of your time, Hakim. That is amazing, and we are so happy about it. Thank you for being here. Many of the poems you'll hear this morning are from his newest book called Prayer Flag Poems. And I think many of you will probably want to know where you can get a copy of that book, so I did ask him to bring some, and about 20 of them are here and will be for sale in the social hall during coffee hour. And now I'll let Hakim say a few words.
Good morning, First Unitarian. I really feel that Reverend Angela, it's just been a fun process. Michaela, an old friend, not old in age, we've just been friends a long time. And Reverend Angela also, I think maybe a year or two now. It's just really fun to work with them. But what she said that really struck me this morning, she always says lots of things that strike me, was about the idea that poetry can teach you a new word. We all know that very well, but poetry can also teach you about yourself, right? And so that's what I want to talk about a little bit this morning, and how poetry is practiced for me. Dr. Mashant, the Ayurvedic healer I made an appointment with while in Pokhara, Nepal, taught me a lot about myself. If you've ever been in the examination room with an Ayurvedic medical practitioner, you know that they can tell you a whole lot about yourself without ever having to take your blood pressure, without having you stand on the scale, without charts, x-rays, MRIs, and stethoscopes. Beyond their inherent gift as healers, their schooling to receive the schooling they receive to cultivate their craft, strict diet to keep the sensitivity of their medium, their instrument sharp, their internal antenna for energy, chakras, vibrations, aura, and balance, the most critical age-old tradition that they practice is listening, without amplification, without even talking. He asked questions. I answered in diatribe. He heard my story with kind eyes and even kinder ears. He practiced dialogue therapy because in holistic medicine, they don't separate the shrink from the blood pressure or the psychiatrist from the dementia. He prescribed changes in diet, a massage, a life coach script for my father's deteriorating memory, and yoga for my hip. My life is sometimes a chronic injury of too many things to do, too many places to be, and being too many things to too many people. And I carry that stress in my hip. I mean, there is a progressive hip injury from years of competitive soccer, no doubt, but Dr. Mashant was clear that this was both mechanical and metaphysical, maybe even metaphorical. He prescribed yoga and proceeded to teach me the difference between yoga for exercise and yoga for meditation. He prescribed me both. He said, make time for myself. I need the exercise for my hip and the inner size for my life. He taught me that my practice can be practical as well as spiritual, but they are two very different things. He implored me to make the reclamation of time and routine of it a practice, like any religious practice. However, how deep I go within, how focused I am in my breathing, how weightless I am in my intention, that is at least as important as the 20 minutes 5 times a week. If the act of kneeling down, bowing our heads, or taking a moment of silence at regular or even predetermined intervals is actually prayer itself, then prayer is poetry, like the verse stanza structure of every holy book, divinely inspired poetry. I met with Dr. Mashant at the end of a 21-day trek through the Himalayas, the top of the world. It was there I engaged, after 10 years of being a poet and never having a consistent writing practice, I engaged in the practice of listening to myself, of dialogue therapy with myself, making my time within and with God more sacred, more practiced. When I was walking 8 hours a day, over 170 plus miles round trip, I wrote poems to the meditative sound of footsteps. I did more than find time, I made time to listen to myself on the side of a mountain. I prayed by doing, and even in the busyness of life, found that I can make time for the journey within. I can write to myself, to the mountain and to the Most High, in their preferred method of Scripture, poetic verse.
Poetry, I tell my students, is idiosyncratic. Poetry is where we are ourselves, though Sterling Brown said every eye is a dramatic eye, digging in the clam flats for the shell that snaps, emptying the proverbial pocketbook. Poetry is what you find in the dirt in the corner, over here on the bus, God in the details, the only way to get from here to there. Poetry, and now my voice is rising, is not all love, 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 and I'm sorry the dog died. Poetry, and here I hear myself the loudest, is the human voice, and are we not of interest to each other?
Much like religious stories, poetry invites us to contemplate the wisdom that others have cultivated through their lives. Hard-fought wisdom, diamond rough. The metaphors that confront us in poetry are even more immediate than parables. They allow us to inhabit new symbols and learn truths we might not be able to access on our own. Metaphors can transform. I invite you into these next poems and hope you find a little nugget of meaning that may be useful to you.
Won't you celebrate with me what I have shaped into a kind of life I had no model? Born in Babylon, both non-white and woman. What did I see to be except myself? I made it up. Here on this bridge between starshine and clay, my one hand holding tight my other hand, come celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed. Won't you clap for every day that has tried to kill me, for everyone who has failed? I wonder if clouds take pictures of people too.
Sometimes we are just an earthling backdrop.
And you move across us slowly, like a herd of wool. Other times you stare stoic, reminding us to move
if we want a better view.
I live my life in widening circles that reach out across the world. I may not complete this last one, but I give myself to it.
I give myself to it.
I circle around God, around the primordial tower. I've been circling for thousands of years.
Circling for thousands of years.
And I still don't know. Am I a falcon, a storm, or a great song?
And I still don't know.
We invite you now into
Gospel salt.
Sometimes I get so nervous when I speak, I can feel my heartbeat in my tongue. And my heartbeat talks faster than an auctioneer, but this is the last place I would ever try to sell something from.
When I get really scared, I imagine my enormous grandmother is standing behind me with her pipe organ arms hugged tight around my chest. She says, "Listen, I know you're running your mouth so your mind can rest.
Now rest."
is no broken levee staring up at the water. It is the bite marks a mother left on the hurricane while her daughter climbed to the 9th Ward rooftop to spray paint. We are still here, y'all.
Yes, we are. While some days we may barely get our feet wet, most of the time we're gonna have to wake and shake the tidal wave off of our Etch-a-Sketch to make space for the notes of a brass-knuckled saxophone carrying the tattered hope of the ocean's prayer. All these words are just paper boats praying they can get there.
Tell me we will get there before we come up broke.
Believing that people, like levees, have to hold themselves together when often
It's our falling apart that gives us the grace.
that makes sure no one ever builds a condo over our broken, open hearts.
2 years after Katrina, I found a seashell beneath an oak tree in New Orleans City Park. I can still hold it to my ear and hear the song the folk singer sang that night. She left so much blood on her guitar strings, and I knew I'd never been touched right, knew we could be instruments.
We could be instruments if we could just let our kite strings get tuned to the lightning tonight.
Tuned to your thunder. I am already shaking like a matador's hands shook in that 1906 California earthquake when 28,000 buildings fell and the people said,
When 28,000 buildings fall, do you know how many walls are no longer there?
All they had between them
was the gospel salt of their sweat, as they carried each other from rubble to the street, where each night they carried the piano to be played by a new refugee.
Some wishes can only be made on the stars' dust.
I know, most of the time my shine cannot hold a match to my rust, so ask me about the rain. I will tell you, my mother says, the thing about wheelchairs is they keep you looking up.
Says, forests may be gorgeous, but there is nothing more alive than a tree that learns how to grow in a cemetery.
So when my grandmother died, I started wearing her thimbles on my fingers when I'd type these poems, hoping every key I'd type would sound like a footstep of someone coming home, the way my friend came home from Iraq and named his baby daughter Viva.
We have all fought for our lives.
More than we know.
Survived our own questions.
How can you grieve a poisoned sea, a bleeding gulf?
Can even the moon handle that kind of gravity, that pull to surrender?
I say, science can split an atom. But what if Eve could put Adam back together by reminding him the garden is just a seed, sometimes so small it can fit on the tip of your tongue?
Say flint.
Flint.
Say spark.
Spark.
See, this is me hitchhiking with a green thumb, hoping to grow something in the trust of letting y'all pick me up, because today, trust me, I was falling for the wreckage. So remind me.
The most fertile lands were built by the fires of volcanoes.
Plant my feet in the one thing that flowered when everything else erupted.
Usman, an immigrant from Pakistan, could not stop saying, brother, brother, to the Jewish man whose hand he held down 98 flights of stairs to escape the fall of the Twin Towers.
Right now, that is the only hour I will set my heart to. The moment we realize sometimes it is the metal in the wind chimes that reminds us how soft the breeze is.
And maybe my grandmother only believed in Jesus because she believed he came back wearing that whip on his back like a halo. Either way, this world has picked me enough times for its madness vase for me to know sanity is not running from the window when the lightning comes. It's turning thunder into grace. Knowing sometimes the break in your heart is like the hole in the flute. Sometimes it's the place
where the music comes through.
Even the Goliaths of this world know of this God of mountaintops,
who stars us in his perfect script
and spies us while we sleep through twinkling peepholes in the midnight sky,
recognizes us
like an only child.
In this milieu of millions, by the crown of our head, every single hair.
Every single hair.
Even when we cover or coif it, to make it easier for her to see us from there.
You are a temple of mud and soul.
Just like us.
An adobe of possibilities.
A hollow of love, language, and laughter.
Your body contains at least a liter of sunlight
and stardust
radiating from every smile.
Our final poem this morning is a participatory one. And so we invite you to join in with us. We're going to go through it twice, once for practice and once for real. Okay? So you'll see that there are lines for the left side and for the right side and for the center. If you feel like you're the center, you're the center, okay? And there are lines for us leaders, and then at the end, a line for everybody in unison. Okay, let's give it a try.
You are not a climb, a cliff, or a conquest.
You are not a symbol, an obstacle, or an enemy.
You are not foreign, not fable, not found,
not flagged,
not figment of imagination,
not even mountain. You are as majestic as they say you are. You are me.
Oh, that was beautiful.
That was pretty good.
Okay, now you know what it feels like. Let's do it and really be in the poem together.
I need you all to be louder.
All right,
You ready?
everybody louder.
You are not a climb, a cliff, or a conquest.
Not a symbol, an obstacle, or an enemy.
You are not foreign, not fable, not found,
not flagged,
not figment of imagination.
Not even mountain. You are as majestic as they say you are. You are me.